I'd like to welcome everybody here to the fall 2012 version of the final workshop, Briefings, where we represent 2 semesters of work on simulated management projects, which by now seem quite real to all of us, and I hope will seem quite real to anybody watching this. This workshop is really intended as a way to integrate the various specific and separate courses we have in everything from sustainability management to economics to environmental chemistry to ecology as a way of actually focusing on the problems that we will be solving as environmental professionals. And so in the summer and fall, we focus on looking at pieces of legislation that have been proposed but not yet enacted in this field. And then in the spring, we'll be doing client projects for nonprofits and government agencies, all around sustainability issues. So I want to welcome everybody. Again, part of what I hope you'll be thinking about, those of you who are students in the program, is really the process of doing these analyses. Next week, we'll be meeting in our groups separately to reflect on the past couple of semesters and what we've learned. One of the things I've learned about the field is I started in water. I ended up in toxic waste, eventually ended up in underground storage tanks, and at least 10 other issues since then. And you never know which issues are going to be thrown at you and at what vantage point. And so even though you're very interested in harmful algae blooms and hydrofracking and all the rest, nobody knows what the problems will be a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when hopefully you'll all still be working on this. So with that, let me ask Professor Palmer's group to come forward and begin.
Good morning. My name is Sara Rummel, and I'll be presenting the final program design for the Harmful Algal Blooms and Hypoxia Research and Control Amendments Act of 2011. But first, I'd like to thank my fantastic team for a great 2 semesters and our faculty advisor, Dr. Palmer, for his help and guidance. The rural communities that dot the Olympic coast of Washington state have relied on the ocean's bounty for a long time. In fact, the single tourist attraction of digging razor clams generates $12 million annually for just the small communities on the southern part of the coast. In 2002, a harmful algal bloom led to the closure of these beaches for a year and a half in order to prevent amnesic shellfish poisoning. The multi-season closure hit the local economies very hard, and it wasn't the first time. These beaches have been closed 4 times in the last 20 years. Communities from the Pacific to the Atlantic, from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico, could all tell similar stories. Harmful algal blooms occur when a complex set of conditions align and spur the rapid growth of algae. When those algae produce toxins, they are harmful to human and aquatic life. In addition, it can lead to hypoxia, or dead zones, which occurs when oxygen is depleted to levels that can no longer sustain life. The main concerns from harmful algal blooms and hypoxia include public health, in particular, toxic shellfish poisoning. Economic, note that it's the local economies that are devastated by particularly large or recurring blooms. And ecological, in particular, disruption of food webs, marine mammal mortality, and significant losses in ecosystem productivity. This is a recurring bloom that happens in Lake Erie each year. Note that Lake Erie provides drinking water for approximately 11 million people. In order to prevent contamination, the drinking water treatment systems had to be altered in order to filter out cyanobacteria, or blue-green algae. Now, while harmful algal blooms are naturally occurring, non-point pollution sources are increasing nutrient loading in our waterways, in particular from synthetic fertilizers, city pavements, and out-of-date sewer infrastructure. This is leading to increasingly frequent and severe outbreaks. In order to minimize harm done to communities like those along the Olympic coast, we have 4 goals: to prevent harmful algal blooms from happening in the first place, to forecast their development so that they can be controlled, reducing their size, and to mitigate harm done to communities. We have 3 strategies to achieve those goals: monitoring developing blooms to collect data for forecasting and research to better understand the ecology of harmful algal blooms and hypoxia, as well as developing technology to control and forecast them, and response to activate mitigation and control activities. And of course, the infrastructure of planning and administration to keep everything moving forward. The legislation established the National Harmful Algal Bloom and Hypoxia Program. This program is responsible for implementing the legislation as well as developing a national strategic plan. A national program director will be hired along with a program coordinator to work with stakeholders as well as the 13 agencies that will oversee the program. Additionally, a consultant will be hired to help manage the strategic planning process. $600,000 has been allocated for salaries, consultant fees, travel, and other overhead expenses. Monitoring is critical to forecasting developing blooms. Technologies used include satellites, autonomous underwater vehicles, as well as buoys like the one that you see here. However, this technology is very expensive, so with that in mind, local monitoring networks will be built by contracting with local professionals who work on or near affected water bodies, like lifeguards or watershed managers, to do good, old-fashioned, but very important water sampling. Regional monitoring coordinators will be hired in each region to oversee the development of those networks. And $13 million has been allocated to expand monitoring. Research grants will place a particular focus on refining technology, moving it from the final development stages into implementation. On the left, you see the autonomous underwater vehicle that I just mentioned. On the right is a sediment resuspension device that controls algal blooms by burying algal cysts before they can develop. In addition, prevention research funding has been increased, especially for a 2-part model that will fund research into prevention methods, along with a program development to train and implement those methods. This will be funded in each region. There are 3 existing research programs, and each will hire a deputy manager to assist with the expanded program. Funding for research has been tripled to $30 million. When harmful algal blooms are forecasted, response activities are initiated and communities are alerted to prevent health hazards. Event response teams will be established in each region in order to be trained on control methods like the clay flocculation technology you see on the left, which is a technology that can clear a water body in 3 to 5 hours, with the clay binding to the algae and carrying them to the sea floor. Additionally, other activities will be funded, like seafood inspection, like you see on the right. In each region, an event response coordinator will be hired, and funding is $10 million in order to improve event response. Harmful algal blooms, not surprisingly, vary from region to region. Varying factors include climate, ocean currents, sources of nutrient loading, and species of algae. With that in mind, 3 regional offices, shown on the map here, will be opened in order to develop regional research and action plans. They will work with stakeholders including local, state, regional, and tribal governments, environmental NGOs, and representatives from the agriculture, fishing, restaurant, and tourism industries. This is the regional office structure. Regional director and coordinators will oversee the planning process, and the monitoring coordinator and event response coordinators are the ones that I mentioned previously. The regional budget will account for the salaries for the director and the coordinators, as well as planning conferences to bring together stakeholders in each region. Now, bringing it all together. This is the organizational chart for the National Harmful Algal Bloom and Hypoxia Program. This is the national planning staff, the monitoring coordinators, the deputy managers for the expanded research program, response coordinators, and the regional planning staff. The main activities for 2013 include hiring staff, initiating planning, and updating grant programs. The updated grants, as well as contracts for monitoring and response, will be awarded in 2014. And this is the overall budget. As you can see, planning accounts for 5% of the total budget. Monitoring, research, and response account for 24%, 53%, and 18% respectively. In conclusion, local monitoring networks will be established, research will be expanded with a focus on prevention and refining technology, and event response teams will be built locally. Together, these strategies will reduce threats, harmful algal blooms, and hypoxia posed to coastal communities like those on the Olympic coast. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you for a great job. Okay, careful with the microphone. You showed a picture of a large mammal on a beach, so that made me wonder if there's a causality between harmful algal blooms and the death of large, imminent death of large animals. If you can expand on that. Thank you.
Yes, that was a whale. And marine mammal mortality, 50% of it is accounted to harmful algal blooms. They eat a lot of shellfish, of krill, which eat algae, and so the bioaccumulation of toxins is what builds up in them.
Hello. So I see you have 3 regional offices, the Pacific, Gulf of Mexico, and North Atlantic. I think I'm just a little bit confused in regards to how would those those 3 offices decide where to do their work? I mean, you have the program coordinator, monitoring coordinator, response coordinator. Is there going to be a systematic way to decide what needs help where, and is there a criteria?
The Gulf of Mexico office will be working on the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. And actually, that's the Mississippi River Basin. So when we talk about stakeholders, we're talking about stakeholders from that region. So folks from Iowa and Minnesota will be participating in the regional planning process. For the Pacific office, the second largest dead zone is off the coast of Washington and Oregon there. So that will be a primary focus. However, there's also significant problems with shellfish poisoning along the coast of California from sort of the middle region of the California coast. And then the Atlantic office will focus primarily on the Gulf of Maine. The Chesapeake Bay has a significant problem, as we'll learn about in a few presentations. So there will also be overlap with other programs that work on the Chesapeake Bay.
Good morning, Sara. It was a great presentation. So I was curious, because it sounds like it's a very elaborate organizational program. What did you find might be some of your challenges in implementing it?
I think probably like all of you are experiencing, funding as a challenge. There's a lot of work to be done, and the problem is getting worse faster. Though I think that with the work, the original bill was passed in 1998, and a lot of work has been done till now. And the technology is at a point where it's, I think, just about to be able to really start addressing some of the problems more quickly. But funding and the scope of the problem and the complexity of the problem.
Thank you.